Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adamcast IRL on the weekends. Saturday show, we go a little bit longer. It's going to be a 2-hour show today. I've got some amazing people again. They've all joined me a couple different times. Last Saturday, we had a long conversation about space, and Wednesday, we had a different conversation about space. So today, we're going to break it down. I don't know how many people were able to watch the live stream on Liftport's YouTube page earlier today, but they were basically discussing the future of space. It was really interesting. I hope you were able to check it out. I did post it on my different areas of the interwebs. So thank you for joining us. We're going to get into it, and I have all these amazing people with me today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So thank you for joining, and I'm going to pass it over to Sean McClain first, and he's going to introduce himself.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show again, Adam. So just a disclaimer up front. I am on this show in a personal capacity. While I am an active duty military member, my views on this show are my own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government or Department of Defense. And I will certainly do my best to distinguish between official Air Force and Space Force positions and any differences I may have if it becomes relevant during the show.
Very nice. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you here. This is Namrata Goswami. Hello, Nami. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Adam. It's a pleasure to be on your show again. So I'm Namrata. I specialize on space policy, grand strategy, and great power competition and cooperation. And within that particular framework, I study specifically China, US, and India space programs, ambitions, and also future scenarios. Great to be on the show again.
Thank you. It's great to have you back. And this is Peter Garretson. He joined us last Saturday. Great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Adam. So I'm Peter Garretson. I'm a senior fellow at a think tank in DC, the American Foreign Policy Council, and I consult on space strategy widely. Have a long history in the DoD before I got out and became a civilian. And this is a topic that interests me a great deal.
Right on. Excellent. Great to have you back. And then, of course, we have Michael Laine. How you doing, Michael?
Great to be here. Thanks a lot. Hey, Adam, before we really begin, I just want to say thanks. Thank you for hosting us in this series last week. It was really great on Saturday, and then again on Wednesday, and then again to kind of finish up this series today. I really appreciate a chance and to really communicate with your audience. This has been a really important conversation that we've been having the last couple of days. And so I just want to say thank you. As for myself, I'm the president of Liftport Group. I've been doing commercial space development for nearly 20 years. My claim to fame or infamy is working on the space elevator, first on the Earth elevator, and then most recently and consistently focused on the lunar elevator. So I do a lot with lunar commercialization.
Excellent. Well, it was great to have you back, and also you're welcome. Thank you for joining me. It seriously is an honor to have you all on the show. I feel like I'm in the presence of great people here. And then finally, of course, and not least, of course, is Joshua Carlson. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you, Adam. I do want to echo Sean's declaration. I also am on the show in a personal capacity, and so anything I say is my own opinion. And of course, if I am presenting something, I will try to differentiate it. If I don't, and then it is always my opinion being presented, not anything official from the Air Force or the Space Force. My background, so I'm a government employee, obviously. I worked for the Air Force, as Space Force, specifically as a program manager. And recently graduate from the Space Horizons Research Task Force at Air Command and Staff College, where I studied for a year. And out of that, published Space Power Ascendant, which is a book that talks about space development theory and the reasons to go to space, particularly for economic development, which I think we're going to get into quite a bit in this show.
Indeed. Yeah, before we finally delve in, I do think that that's actually the very important, and that's going to be the focal point of, as far as what I think is the most important part about adventuring into space, is making it, about economics instead of about military. But I just want to say thank you for joining us, everyone out there that's watching with us today. Make sure you subscribe. and actually follow Liftport, because that's Michael's company, and that's part of the reason why. No, that is the reason why all this group of people have come together on my show. It's been fantastic. So let's get into it. Joshua, I know I hope you guys watched today, because it would have actually helped you understand what we're going to be talking about a little bit more. But that's okay. Hopefully, you get a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about. So, Joshua, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Usually when you have a conversation, you think afterwards all the things you wish you would have said. And so I just had a couple of those that occurred to me after the debate this morning. The first was that there seemed to be a misunderstanding by my opponent in discussing what space dominance would look like. He seemed to suggest it was like we were gonna set up the Death Star and start militarily taking over space, and that's not at all what I've said, and that's never what I've said. The whole point of space dominance is to be able to have a presence, and then, if necessary, step that up through either the coercion or force levels. But the important thing is to have a presence, something there that is able to serve as a deterrent for hostile actors. And we were talking about China on Wednesday pretty extensively. There's a reason for that. China really is our primary threat in space. China has demonstrated repeatedly that it is a untrustworthy actor. Most people are aware that China built islands in the South China Sea, but most people might not know that China signed on to a treaty in which they and several other nations signed on to agree that they would not alter the characteristics of the South China Sea when they signed on to this treaty. And then obviously building islands is kind of altering the terrain in the South China Sea. And so they went back on that completely. They've also flown in the face of international law. They occupied the Scarborough Shoals in complete abeyance of international law, and the Philippines took them to court. The international court found them at fault for that and ordered them to give it back. And basically China said, no, that our legal system does not recognize that decision, and so we're simply not going to do it.
Yep.
And fishing ships and other things contested natural resources. The Chinese have used both military and fishing vessels to ram ships belonging to both civilians and the Taiwanese Coast Guard just a couple of months ago. This is the demonstration of a bad actor. Ultimately, the quote today was, we want to build trade ships, not battleships. If all you send are trade ships and there is nothing to deter a battleship from hostile actors acting against those trade ships, they will, and they will continue with impunity, because quite honestly, a trade ship isn't going to be able to fight them. That was one of the major disagreements that we had. Obviously, Blue Water, first and foremost, is about economic development of space, cislunar, lunar, beyond. But to do that, especially in the current climate with a hostile actor, China, attempt to do that completely without any military force able to protect American interests doesn't seem to be very reasonable, in my opinion.
I am inclined to agree with you there, because, who's to say that they don't go back on any treaty that we make with them in the future in space? As far as the moon goes, they're the ones who are actually on the moon right now, looking on the far side of the moon. And we don't know anything about it, right? Because they're not telling us anything. I'm going to bring everyone in on this, actually. Just why not? That's great. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Or go ahead, Peter.
So I do. I mean, I think, Americans have always had the same starting point you started off with, Adam, which is that, we have always wanted and welcomed peaceful commerce. And we never even got into the game of dominance in any sphere until that was challenged. So, what happened to us as a young nation was pretty pivotal in how we, had to think about things. So we had been operating our merchant ships under the aegis, the shield of the British Navy. And when we achieved independence, they withdrew that protection and support. And all we had was merchant ships. We had no Navy at all. And what ended up happening was, because there was a lack of protection and nobody else was willing to protect our merchant vessels, they were preyed upon. Our citizens were stolen, they were kidnapped, They were pressed into slavery. They were pressed into service in other states and navies. Huge amounts were stolen. We had to pay these unbelievable reparations that were 10% of our national budget at the time. And it was only after repeatedly seeing that we could not rely on the largesse of foreign powers that we took the extraordinary step of building a navy in the first place. And we've had that navy for a long time. We've never sought to keep others down or keep others out. What we do with that navy is to maintain the high seas, to maintain it open for trade. The fact that there are U.S. warships in every ocean in the world doesn't shut down. It perpetuates that trade. It's not escalatory. It's de-escalatory. And the same thing will happen in space. What we want to have is every nation, including China, able to profit from the immense wealth in space. But we don't want ever to have a return to closed empires where the United States, for its trade and its interest, has to be at the mercy of a foreign power that could decide at any time that they don't want to extend those benefits.
That sounds good. I agree. I do feel like that's what generally most people would want, free trade and peace, right? Peace is that's really the end game, right? Is what we really want. Peace in space. We don't want it to be. No one wants it to become a war zone out there.
One of the conversations earlier this morning was, there were probably, I would say, all total, there was probably north of 30 professional military folks on the call, 25 to 30 professional military folks. And the 3-star general that was on the call, Lieutenant General Quast, he was like, nobody wants to go to war because nobody really wants to eat the MREs. And I countered with, we don't really want to go to war, sir, because we don't want to bleed. Right. Yeah, he was minimizing it because I think that's how you become a 3-star general. You're like, okay, you take the hits.
Right.
But I really appreciate his perspective that I think, in my experience a long time ago, and let me tell you, all of these guys on the call here really outranked me. I was just a lowly grunt crawling through the mud. It doesn't matter what level you are in the military. We're often portrayed as being very hawkish and wanting to stir up trouble. And it's the least thing we want to do because we don't want to go out there and, the phrase is the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. We don't want to be the folks on the front end bleeding.
Right.
And we don't want to cause other people to start bleeding without a really, 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 really good reason. Yeah. So that was one of the conversation I thought was really interesting today about how we had a lot of international folks on this call. We had the president of International Space University representing kind of the global audience of space. In his role, in his role as president, ISU has about 5,000 graduates over nearly 35 years and over 100 nations. So his role in the conversation today was to talk about, if we're going to try and build this Star Trek vision of the future, what does that mean? And we invited him to this conversation of Americans talking to Americans because the results of this conversation are going to echo all around the world, academically, commercially, civilly, and defensively. So,
what was his name?
Dr. Juan Didalmo from International Space University. Yeah. Right. And I thought his comments were really great because, the common misperception is that military folks just want to, start trouble.
Yeah.
And we don't want to. And it was really great to have that message echo out into the world through Dr. Didalmo's community. There were.
That's great. Let me hold on. I don't want to move. I don't want to move away from the conversation though, because I actually really would like to hear from Nami. What are the chances that this is what China wants to, that China would want to, I, I don't know, partner up with us and make it so that, because think about the world right now, they're going into the South China Sea claiming it's theirs, and America they've passed warships through it over the past couple months, kind of like this back and forth, like, are they gonna attack us? And then they actually lased one of our planes. Now I don't know if it's a military thing that happened, but I have worries that we're very positive in our what we want. We obviously don't want war. We want to just make I guess spaceships that are just patrolling space to make sure that no pirates are happening, and that every country that ends up in space is being civil. What are the chances of China going, okay, we're going to remain civil and we're not going to try to take ownership of the moon?
Well, so it actually a great question because it enables me to talk a bit about grand strategy as well.
Okay.
So I think for China, the important ancient wisdom, and which is reflected in some of the conversations that they're having today, is that the civilization that can actually become the greatest civilization with the greatest nation state without fighting is the superior civilization. So that kind of thinking is very much ingrained in China's extension of its influence, including the usage of space. So if you read the book that came out a few years ago called The China Dream by Lu Mingfu, who is a retired colonel in the PLA, People's Liberation Army. So he points out that the China way is the more benign way. So this is what China would do to extend its influence in space. First, it would establish capacity and capability, of which military is but one part. The second important thing is that it would extend influence by building legitimacy around a particular system that it wants to project, which it's doing today, signing memorandum of understanding with the United Nations Office on Outer Space Affairs, offering its space station to the world. And so what is so interesting is that China is not really crying out for cooperation with the US, but what it's actually building is the structural conditions under which the United States will actually be forced to cooperate with China. And I think that is the very clever way of actually extending its influence. Now, the question that you come to, that is, will China behave, say, for instance, if it takes over the moon? That's an unknown because we'll have to see how it behaves when it's actually there. But we can actually draw, that is why history matters, and that's why a deep understanding of grand strategy matters. So if you look at Chinese grand strategy, it's two different streams. One is, of course, the Confucian stream, which talks about harmonization, the concepts that we talked about today as well, peaceful rise, getting along with others. But then the stronger stream is actually the more realist, legalist stream, which is the Han Feizi school of thought. And President Xi is a great disciple of Han Feizi. And so Han Feizi points out that if you want to become the greatest power in the world, you have to sometimes use power as an influencing tool. And by that, he means military and economic power to stake claim on areas that might be beneficial to you. So you can see that reflected, for instance, in the South China Sea, where China has extended its physical attributes, exactly things as George pointed out, in the code of conduct that they signed in 2012, they said they wouldn't do, but they went ahead and did it. Its behavior with, say, a small country like Bhutan, where it has a dispute over a particular area. And then it agreed with Bhutan in 1998 that it would not escalate the conflict. But then in 2017, it actually escalated the conflict and did exactly what it said it wouldn't do. You see a similar reflection of behavior with India. You see a similar reflection of behavior with Japan in the East China Sea. So what I'm trying to get here is that if you look at the pattern of Chinese behavior on Earth, especially when it comes to areas that are rich in resources, they give priority to first come, first serve. Second, entitlement based on that. And third, their pattern of behavior is to sign agreements and give an idea that they're very peaceful, they're all about cooperation, but at the same time, they actually behave in a way that actually contradicts all that they have committed themselves to. And
Yep.
so that's the concern. So okay, you're in the south pole of the moon, you're the first country to be there. think of a scenario where you find water ice on the South Pole, or say helium-3, which is a very precious metal. Now, China would establish a zone of non-interference, which it has done in the South China Sea, the ADIZ, um, area denial. I think what it's anti-area denial identification zone.
Air defense identification zone.
Air defense identification zone. So what happens is that once you establish such an identification zone, you then claim that other countries would need permission from you to actually pass through that zone. And you might say you don't want to do it, but you have to, because your civilian airlines will not take a chance. American airlines are now giving their coordinates to China every time they pass over China's air defense identification zone. So by unilaterally, they're establishing codes of conduct, as you can see. And so in the South Pole, you can have a similar scenario. You can have a Chinese, zone of non-interference. An American company, say Moon Express, who has goals of landing there, wants to land there. But then you have to take permission, because they would say that if you don't take permission, you are liable to be targeted. So it's a concern.
Yeah. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, if I could put in two streams. One is that I think when we talk about conflict with China, war with China, a lot of times we conjure up these apocalyptic World War II visions that it's going to be just be absolute devastation. Honestly, in the world of nuclear weapons, more than likely you're not going to get another World War II. If there's anything close to it, it would be the end of the world. Quite honestly,
Yeah.
you get an exchange of nuclear weapons. Everyone knows this, and
So not.
I would assuming some modicum of reasonableness, it won't happen. Which means conflict, and I would even argue the term war is being misapplied if that's what you think that it's going to look like. As Nami was saying, that's basic, and I think Pete as well. The war that will probably occur will be one through soft power, through economics, through resources, through the setting of norms, forcing people into their system. Looking at Nami's example, I'm pointing because she's above me on the screen. If you had somebody just standing out in the street, and they put out their hand and said, "You must get my permission to come through here," and you do that, and then the next day that you have to do it again, well, pretty soon this person is essentially playing traffic cop. What they have done is establish authority because they have been willing because you've had to obey them, because maybe they say that if you don't, then they'll block the street or something, which would basically be what China is doing. And China uses this economic power that they have developed to influence other nations. For instance, with the Hong Kong, when people would speak out, companies were banning people that were speaking out.
Yep.
China is able to mass their economic power, their economic clout, and either exclude economic actors that they deem as perhaps unsympathetic to Chinese causes. This is, I believe, the warfare that we will see. This is a warfare through economic means, primarily with a sharp pinpricks, so to speak, of military or quasi-military force, like I said, the fishing ship ramming a Coast Guard vessel, to ensure that everyone understands that if you don't listen to what we're doing, then this is going to happen to you.
So this is the kind of thing that I'm worried about. Nami, you even just mentioned how I think it was President Xi who was saying how it's not about might versus might. That's not how they're going to win. They're going to win by undermining everyone else in a non-physical manner, and that's kind of the warfare that we're seeing nowadays. It's all on the internet and convincing people that they're good and that they're gonna uphold their, they're not gonna break their treaties. Like you mentioned something about them signing a treaty with the UN. Who's to say that they're gonna hold that, hold to that, or are they just making it seem that they're on everyone's good side? They're helping everyone out, and then they're gonna take over when the time is right. All right, now we have all the power. Now let's amplify all the authority that we've gained and crush all the resistance. Now space is ours. And because space is the future, if someone who controls space, if you really think about what that means, they can basically control Earth. And that's something that I definitely I see as a problem, is them slowly creeping up and taking over in different means, different countries. We talked about it the other day about how they, there's that debt that, they go to a small country and said, let's build up something. Oh, you can't pay it. Well, that's all right. Now it's ours, and we own a piece of your land. And they're doing that all over the place, slowly but surely. Again, it's under the guise of, I'm here to help you out. I'm here to bring you into the new generation of having an airport and having, a society. And but now you can't pay for it, so now it's just a piece of China. So I don't know. I feel like I'm going a little long there, but
Yeah.
that this is something that I fear. Go ahead, Nami.
Yeah, so let me give you an example from today. So we know that Hong Kong has been rising up for fighting against extradition. So
Yep.
China, as you know, agreed when the UK gave over Hong Kong that they would not extradite Hong Kong residents to China. But then they started having this law, and then the Hong Kong residents rose against it. And then you had the pro-democracy protest. Now this is where things get so dicey. So last year, I testified along with the pro-democracy leaders for the China Forum at the U.S. Senate, and they were sitting next to me. And they were telling us about what happened in terms of the street protests, the violence that ensued, and that the People's Liberation Army forces were waiting in the background. And the Americans basically reassured them that this is something very valid, that they shouldn't be treated the way they have been treated, and that the world is standing with Hong Kong. My biggest concern then was this, that we say that we passed a Hong Kong democracy legislation as well. And so my point at that time was that, fine, you passed that, but what would happen if some of these leaders get arrested? And so because they have to go back to Hong Kong, they're not going to live here. And that's exactly what happened today.
Yep.
So China passed, I think a month or so back, the National Security Act, by which they said that any Hong Kong or Chinese citizen that participated in any activity that was supported by a foreign actor is liable for sedition and is going to be arrested. Immediately, all the young Hong Kong pro-democracy, pro-liberty leaders resigned, saying that their life is in danger. And today, the main leader has been arrested. Now, see, the concern is that what happens now? Will China face some kind of sanction from the United Nations? Will President Xi be forced to behave in terms of, you cannot retrospectively apply a law? The law didn't exist at the time, but now they are being arrested based on that. So think of that situation where a one-party system is dominant, and that kind of a country is in charge of an international space order. And I think we need to be very seriously concerned about that. That's a concern of mine.
Agreed.
So, I just follow that up, that, we would not be here if it weren't for the specific ways in which China has behaved. The United States very much started off with sort of the same question that you had. Our assumption was, we'll let China into the WTO, we'll welcome them in as a full member, of the community of nations. And over time, they don't really mean that stuff about communism. As they get wealthier, they'll become, more like us. But and I'll also point out, right, nobody would be talking about the need for a space force. Nobody was concerned, when India went to the moon, when Japan goes to the moon, when Israel goes to the moon, when the European Union goes to the moon, which has a larger GDP than the United States. What concerns you is, how do actors actually behave? And, we extended that hand at exactly the sort of partnership that you laid out to China. And, in response, what have we gotten? We haven't seen any of the type of political liberalization that we were expecting. We've seen this kind of depth diplomacy. You said they've stolen an unbelievable amount of our intellectual property, maintained their protectionist and currency manipulation, threatened our allies, on their borders. Rather than being happy to be within the shield of the American Navy, they've chosen to build their own to challenge it, although we never closed, their lines of communication. And rather than, being happy with space as a sanctuary, they took this step in the 2007 of, doing an ASAT and pursuing multiple lines. And there's so many things with what they're doing, domestically with their treatment of their own citizens. So, there's this confluence, this question of like, because of their past behavior, the sort of cooperation that I think all of us would like to have and would naturally have, as we have, for instance, with Taiwan. It isn't cultural. It relates to a very specific system, that they have and policy choices that they've made. But as a result, we have to consider that, although I'm sure there are ways in which we can strike, deals just like we did with the Soviet Union on, for instance, arms control, there are probably ways in which we can attempt to come to, agreements, with China, for instance, on the economic exploitation of space. But the problem we have is this problem of moral hazard, of that they're going to be happy to put in, to get into any, agreement, because it lulls us and it allows them to do what they want. And if, the past behavior is indication, we have to worry that they'll cheat. And particularly one of the places where we have to really worry about that is that if we fail to take seriously the possibility, and here I want to echo too, right? The things that concern me are less some cataclysmic war as these minor acts of coercion that completely, change how the map is going to be drawn. So an example that I like to give is the Battle of Fort Caroline on our East Coast. France was trying to establish a colony on the East Coast that was considered to be part of Spain's territory. Well, that colony, was so far from home, so difficult for even, a superpower of the time, to project that economic, the tiny economic unit, right? That the battle that decided the course of nations and how the borders of the entire North American continent were drawn, was less than 200 people, tiny fraction of a percent of the power of the nation. And yet that decided so much that went on. So what worries me is if you lapse into a laissez-faire attitude and you let American companies go out there without the kind of vigilance, to be there to say we care, we're watching, we are partnering in this, right? You risk the possibility that an actor will say, they can't attribute if I do a little mischief here, and mischief is to my benefit. And if you're starting from a position, as Nami articulated, of a very, very realpolitik, that it isn't about the sanctity of the contracts you've made and the words that you made and the agreements you've signed up. If you look at that purely as a, as something that you say publicly, but it's like agreements among mafia dons, it isn't something that you feel morally compelled to do, that you'll just violate it, when your interests, don't coincide with that. We have to be, in my view, vigilant, because the consequences, as you pointed out, Adam, are so vast. They are vast for the security of the Earth because of the potential of what space industrialization brings, and they're vast for the future of freedom, because much of the world is free and democratic today because the top power is the United States, and because we care about other countries allowing political liberty.
Yep.
That would be different if an autocracy is the most wealthy nation and they are able, to set the rules of the game. Far fewer countries would be able to stand, and maintain a democratic system in the face of something like that. So when something has the ability to completely alter the order of nations, of who is the top economic power, we cannot be lax in our strategic planning about how that develops.
100% agreed. Yep. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
We're kind of we're using a lot of complicated language, and in a way, we're all all of us have some sort of official position, and so we can't necessarily say exactly what's in our heads. But if you had a friend, you meet somebody and you get along with them for a little while, even a couple weeks, couple months, couple years even, and at some point they lie to you, and there's consequences to those lies. and then they cheat you out of something, and then there's consequences to that. And then they steal something from you, and there's consequences to that. At some point, Adam, you asked a minute ago, like, is there a possibility of the United States working with China cooperatively, economically, or scientifically? And there have been examples, especially with Russia, especially when the Soviet Union collapsed, where we did that, right? But if somebody continually lies to me, continually cheats me, and steals from me, I'm not going to be their friend anymore, right? And so we, the United States, we have rules, specific laws mandated by Congress and signed that say, for example, that NASA may not work with China under any circumstances. I won't get into it, but there's some work that I do that I am forbidden to share any information about some of the stuff that we work on with any foreign nationals, right? Those are rules that is very common within the space field. It's called ITAR. There's a lot to that. That could be a whole panel discussion. Would probably tear everybody's hair out. But we don't even allow us Americans to work with allied nations under some situations, even though they're friends of ours, even though they are trusted, they are loyal, they haven't stolen from us, they don't lie and cheat and steal, right? Even our good allies, we have restrictions on. And for folks like China, like North Korea, like several other bad actor nations, and by the way, bad actor is like a real term of art. Like, it's not just some BS line that we use. That there's actual language around bad actors. Yeah. So no, I don't think it's realistic, Adam, to think that we're just going to suddenly change our perspective with China, because China would have to do an awful lot to make us trust them again. And I don't see that happening. I believe they have deceived a lot of other nations into pseudo partnerships that will lull them into a certain, false sense of security. Yeah. But I don't think America is going to fall for that anymore. I think.
But Adam, there's a real upside to this.
Yeah.
And that is that, first of all, Americans excel in competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
we get lazy and slow and we're like a bear in hibernation, when we're just on top and we don't have a good competitor and we don't know what's at stake, right? Yep. But when we get a true competitor, and China is a true peer competitor, there it is, right? It really brings out the best in us. And the other upside is really for the world, right? So provided that in the long term, the United States is able to play this infinite game, right, and prevent an autocracy from becoming the top power. And that does not need a war ever, right? That just means that we have to be better in our economic model and our strategy than them, right? But as long as we can win that strategy of technology, that strategy of position, this race is going to so accelerate the ability of humanity. We're going to want to beat them. They're going to want to beat us. It's going to bring out, the best of our competitive juices. We have basically been treading water, standing still, doing nothing since, the Apollo moon race, a little bit in SDI, right? But now this acceleration is going to cause a tremendous flowering of activity. It's going to burst to an ecosystem on both sides, within China, within the United States. That push is going to really accelerate the ability, of nations to, exploit space resources, to exploit space solar power, to really grasp this, to finally, move beyond and become a multiplanetary civilization. And let's be honest, that just would not have happened at anywhere near the speed it's happening today, were we not afraid that China might win this game.
Yeah, that's
so,
a good point.
At the most fundamental level, right, in terms of what is good for humanity, the fact that the United States has a challenger and realizes that a lot is at stake here is the best of all possible worlds.
And we've already started to see that blossom, right? Sean, you should jump in here a little bit because you've been very quiet. But look at this, right? We've got like 3,000 space companies on the books, official. Some of them are funded, some of them are PowerPoint companies, but there's north of 3,000 space companies trying to build something, and some of those teams are 2 and 3 people toiling away in obscurity. Some of them are 5 and 10,000 people funded by all the billionaires that are in our industry. So I think that our competitive advantage is, we've got a lot of smart people. We're focusing on the problem. There is a surprising amount of capital there, and while we, as a culture, we don't pick winners and we don't decide this is the national direction of our nation. What we do is we plant a bunch of seeds and then nurture the ones that are growing. So I have a lot of confidence in where we are right now. I think the future is pretty bright. Like I like our future. I think we have a pretty bright, really near 2 years, 18 months, 5 years. Right. Everything is going to change. Everything.
Better futures is coming. So, Michael, you actually just mentioned something about how, the bad actors, right? And then, not being able to trust people after they've, broken your trust, essentially, that's where it boils down to. Now we've been working with Russia for a long time. We've been paying, and even our astronauts speak Russian. They've been going over to Russia to fly to the ISS for many years, and now that partnership is. I don't know if it's really come to an end, but Elon Musk and now the Dragon capsule, like it's done, right? I mean, I know what that motion means. Now this question is for Josh. Josh, during this morning's conversation, you actually mentioned that Russia is the bigger threat right now, and you didn't really elaborate on that. And my mind was like, whoa, I want to know more about why that is. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So to be really clear, I didn't say Russia is the bigger threat. I said they are perhaps the more immediate.
Oh, you're right.
Threat.
You're right. Immediately. Okay, but we were talking about space, though, correct?
So no, I'm talking about space military. So
space military.
Within the last, Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last month or two.
Hey, wait. Josh, we can't hear you again. You've moved something.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So within the last month or two, Russia tested a co-orbital ASAT, and Space Force, the U.S. Space Force, announced this in the news to say that, hey, everyone, just so you know, they're doing this. And then Putin came out, I think, yesterday and said that they wanted to, sign a test ban treaty on ASATs or something like that, which is really funny since we just announced that they conducted an ASAT test.
Yeah.
I think Brad Townsend, he was my opposite. He mentioned, hey, Russia is hitting way above their weight militarily. Their military capabilities are fairly significant in space or capable of affecting space.
Right.
But we both came to the conclusion fairly quickly that is the really big guy. He's got a lot of muscle up top. He's got really small legs.
Right.
In a race, which is what we are doing, he's going to get outpaced. I'm not worried about Russia. Russia is not going to be a concern, in my opinion, to the United States in the next 5 to 10 years, simply because economically they will not be able to keep pace with us, assuming there's not some dramatic change.
I mean, economically, Russia is smaller than France in their GDP, and they're not growing. They're declining. They're facing the same demographic decline problems. They're having a lot of problems keeping their industrial base. So, can Russia create problems for us militarily? Of course.
Yeah.
They're still a great power, but Russia's not in a position where they are going to become the leader of the world and establish norms. There isn't really a chance that you could see a rollback of global freedom. Nor is Russia have a very impressive plan for how they would economically develop the solar system. Capable as they are technically capable. And it's also interesting, even though we've had this problem lately with them in South Ossetia, I can remember hearing from scholars that Russia makes a lot of noises, but in point of fact, it's comparatively pretty good at following agreements that it's made. I wouldn't say that's universal. We certainly have problems with them over arms control treaties, but when I prioritize threats, I'm prioritizing the biggest threats in the long term, and it matters what winning is. So winning to me, particularly when it comes to space, we're talking about a future where everyone is prosperous and free. That's what winning looks like. When Chinese can enjoy the same political liberties that we do, when everyone has a first world lifestyle, that's sort of what winning is. And to get there, there are definite things we can do. You sort of had started the pre-conversation asking, like, what do you do to ignite this, right? Well, Michael gave a great example of this, this diversity, these 3,000 space companies. And they're going to be trying their best to make a profit. But let me tell you what companies don't do. They don't create markets. Governments create, sanction, and allow markets. And they, in the same way that a physical market, the government of the town would say, this is the square where we're going to have a market. You're going to have court systems that make sure that people enforce, what they do. You're going to have a police station there so that people can't run in and take stuff. Once that market is structured, right, then private industry can do well if it's adequately protected. So that's the first thing. Government has a role in structuring the broader cislunar, and space economy market. Then, government is a huge purchaser of services. And if we strategically invest and request services and products that expand that space economy, that's a key role that government can do. And then government spends a huge amount on science and technology. So to the extent that that science and technology is thoughtful about how it's invested, that it creates dual use benefit, dual use meaning, yes, it can be used for government or military capabilities, but it also, forwards the private sector. You want to do that. And an example of that would be if the Space Force was to build, a fusion engine, for instance, to go and conduct planetary defense against asteroids and comets, that engine would be equally valuable for the private sector to go and mine those asteroids and bring the material back. So it's that kind of thinking, that can allow, that are the things that the government specifically, that U.S. policy can do to make sure that 3,000, company ecosystem can really flourish. And I should say, Michael, there's also all of our allies that have many startups, right? And to the extent that we structure policies to bring along, free nations that at least share the vision of a liberal economic and political order, not just on Earth, but wherever human beings might eventually do business or live, we're going to have a much broader ecosystem. And they cannot be, there are two things we cannot reasonably expect. We cannot or should not expect companies to do their own self-help and protect themselves, whether, of the U.S., and we should not expect that our allies that don't have anywhere near the resources are going to shoulder the primary burden of security. We want that to be the United States because that gives us the special role and the claim on the first ability to structure the rules in a way that benefits us.
And I mean, we've basically been doing that for all the seas, the oceans, for the past couple hundred years, basically. Well, maybe that might be exaggerating, but go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I was going to say, honestly, we've only been really a world power in the capacity that we've been since World War II, really. And a good part of that was because most of the rest of the world was in ruins by the end of that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But point. I mean, we have right now the naval capability. I could be wrong. I might be off by one or two, but we basically have more aircraft carriers in our fleet alone than the rest of the world combined.
Right.
Wow.
Basically, like we have that much naval power to be able to project into the blue water and the world is better for it because we can have free trade. We can use that force to structure international naval exercises and task forces. I talked about the task forces that were targeting pirates operating off the coast of Africa within the last decade or two, using that force for good with an international community around it to achieve common goals that benefits everyone. That's ultimately the point of space for the purposes of economic benefit.
Yeah, we basically showed the world that we're not going out there to conquer lands with this power. We're not trying to take over countries. We're just I hate the term world police because it's always kind of frustrated, the whole military complex machine rolling along. But the more I learn about everything, the more I understand that there is a requirement for that, or else someone's going to come along and take over.
If,
So there needs to be some sort of
if,
force there.
if we were that kind of country, we would have rolled tanks over Canada and Mexico, generations ago. We certainly have had the capacity to do that. That's just
True.
not who we are, right? That's not who we are as a culture, as a nation.
Yep.
And so when we talk about, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, I think that we have a pretty damn good track record for being. I don't actually shy away from the phrase world police. I think that we have a very solid track record that we can stand on that says we are good at being the world police. We don't like bullies. We don't tolerate bullies. I have two interns that work for me, and I said to them one day recently when the Space Force came out with their new official doctrine, which is, by the way, brilliant. I said, look at the map, the way it is. The map that exists today is not the same map that I grew up when I was their age. It wasn't the same map that existed when I was in high school. But look at the map, because it probably isn't going to change very much. If Space Force is fully developed the way it looks like it might be, the map isn't going to change, which means bullies aren't going to get to, just decide to roll tanks against their neighbors someday. And I think the United States Space Force could be, a very powerful, stabilizing example, maybe a shining light to the world. I hope it will. That's been our goal and our focus. So fingers crossed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you think about what Starship is doing. Elon's trying to make it so that you can almost get anywhere on the globe quickly and efficiently and reuse it over and over again. And that's going to be
that shrinks the globe. All
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we're all connected even more so.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Yeah. Go ahead, Nami.
Yeah, so I think since Michael and Peter both talked about the Space Force capstone doctrine, and I thought today in the morning, I came away from the discussion thinking that there was conflation of tactical and strategic. So when you look at low Earth orbit or orbital, that's very tactical, means to a particular goal. So you develop your space capacity or military capacity in low Earth orbit so that it can support forces on the ground. But that's not the strategic end goal of a particular country's space mission. And so what was so interesting and what was actually quite insightful, so I picked up certain definitions from the doctrine so that we can have an understanding of what the Space Force is actually thinking about. So if you look at their definition of space power, so the doctrine says that national space power is the totality of a nation's ability to exploit the space domain in pursuit of prosperity, economic development, and security. So it's
do that slower so you can parse the pieces a little bit. I know it. I've read it. I want to parse it a little, part at a time.
Okay. So definition of national space power in the Space Force doctrine. National space power is the totality of a nation's ability to exploit the space domain in pursuit of prosperity and security. So it's not just military dominance, space dominance, it's prosperity and security. Now, they define what is military space power. So this is national space power. So military space power enables a nation to protect and defend space-based sources of economic power. It's very clear. The
Yeah.
There it
goal
is.
is economic power. And then now this is the even more interesting idea, and I was thinking about it. So we think that once we talk about military presence in space or military assets in space, it's all about conflict. But actually, the Space Force doctrine describes to you what space security is. And so in their definition, space security is a presence mission that helps assure partners that the United States military is positioned to monitor and protect their interests. Now, here comes the most insightful line. Ultimately, space security seeks to encourage partners, not compel an adversary. So you see, the focus is on partners, and this is a military space doctrine.
Yeah.
The focus is
Love
on
that.
partner. The focus is on developing alliances, but you do need military power for security, not for conflict. But you're prepared for conflict in case your security is threatened. And so it's a really well done, very simple assessment, but very understandable, relatable assessment of what space security and space power is about. And I think that's where my own study of grand strategy comes in. So, grand strategy is not just military power. So, what is the end goal of the United States? The end goal of the United States as a nation is to offer democratic, free based societies, support democratic societies across the world, uh, offer a life where you can have a pursuit of happiness, prosperity, and the military is not the end goal. The military is one of the means to achieve and secure the particular value-based understanding of what a society is. And so I think that's what the Chinese grand strategy is very different. So China's grand strategy is about maintaining a one-party system where you have economic rights, but you do not have political rights and free speech. So it's a very different society. And so that's important. Now, I'll quickly end with Russia. So I think there is a misunderstanding of, we talk a lot about cooperation with the Soviet Union when it was in existence till 1989. And then we talk about cooperation in space with Russia. It's also about Russia offering its rocket services for a fee because
Right.
the United States was not able to do it. Now, what is not understood is that in the grand strategic sense, in a sense, the nation's identity, who it is, Russia, especially under President Putin, has never been comfortable with an American led world order. It has very much been about the resurgence of Russia. It's about maneuvering Russia's space in the world. And you can see that reflected in the Russian Space Agency's response to NASA's Artemis Accord, the recent accord where NASA said that we will sign bilateral agreements with other countries which are our allies. The Russian Space Agency said that this is an illegal document. This is about colonization of space. The US is trying to privatize space. And so Russia went ahead and said that they are going to collaborate with China on China's moon base. So you can see that from a Russian perspective, they are willing to cooperate with you, have cooperation in the International Space Station. But in terms of ideological coming together, in terms of accepting America as the primary power in space, I don't think they've said that. And so I think that's where there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what Russia's grand strategy is.
So it seems like they weren't actually partnered with us. They were just selling their rocketry to get us into space. And we had to basically just, that was it. We were just buying tickets to space.
No.
Yeah.
There was definitely more to that.
Yeah.
We didn't want their rocket scientists being bought by the highest bidder, right? It wasn't just so the Soviet Union collapses, right? And folks with legit PhDs in rocket science are basically on the equivalent of bread lines. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, there weren't any bread lines anymore. So all of a sudden, these very, very highly skilled people don't know where to go, can't really even afford their apartment. And so America is like, wait. We don't really want all these folks moving over to North Korea and Iran. And at the time, I think Saddam Hussein was offering like huge money for Soviet scientists to come work for him. So no. It seems on the surface that it was a bailout program to the ex-Soviets, but there was a lot of technical strategy behind not wanting their brain trust, because there were a lot of very smart folks over there. Hell, there was actually a website that was named HireRussianScientist.com. I don't know if that thing still exists, but that really existed once upon a time. So yes, there was a time where the International Space Station was kind of under development. We wanted to do something. They still had the then Soviet Mir was still flying in the sky. And an American group went out and leased the Soviet asset Mir because the Russians couldn't maintain it anymore. And there was an opportunity for Americans to go out and lease a space station. So that's a hell of a story. You should look up Orphans of Apollo. It's a great documentary. Yeah, Peter, yep. Great documentary of that particular time period. But when we were still running the space shuttle and we needed a backup, they had the technical chops to be a solid backup. So that partnership actually served us very well when we had our two space launch crashes and incoming crashes. And when we decommissioned the space station, our space shuttle, boy, did the Soviets then learn capitalism really, really fast, right? Because they were the only game in town and they were able to charge a very premium price. Right. So it was a good strategic move 20 years ago when the Cold War ended. I definitely think it overplayed its hand. So glad that.
Know about. Go ahead, Josh. You want to add something?
Yeah. If I could just put one thing in. I know we've talked about China quite a bit at this point. But it would be one. If I could just add one thing.
Sure.
Of course, Sun Tzu very famously said, know your enemy, know yourself. And so it's very important to know about China, about their thoughts, and obviously NAMI. I'm not the China expert, but if I say anything incorrect, please correct me here. But basically, I read a very interesting article recently talking about the engineers of the human soul, and so the underlying currents of Chinese thought. And basically, it's a combination of dynastic Chinese thinking with not Marxist, not communist. Interestingly enough, Stalinist, specifically brand of communism. Now, why Stalin is important? If anyone has read 1984, great book, by the way, you need to read it if you haven't. 1984 takes place in a dystopian communist future where there's 4 nations left in the world. They are mass nations, and all they do is fight each other. And it is a continual resculpting of the national narrative. So it is a continual struggle against the outside. And that is ultimately what Stalin had to sell in Russia in the 1930s, because Lenin had promised a workers' paradise. And here everyone is in breadlines, and they have executioner squads moving out to take care of people they don't like. They set up the gulags. It was not a happy place to live at this time for most people. And so Stalin had to develop a philosophy that focused everyone on the struggle, the struggle against the betrayers to the party. And so a continual purging would make the party better. In 1984 captures that, and that's a fictitious account of it. But Stalin, right around the time that Mao studied Stalin's thought, and so Mao adopted it, brought it into the Chinese Communist Party. So they didn't adopt Leninism or Marxism, technically. They adopted Stalinism, which focuses on the constant struggle. That is why I think, among other things, and then dynastic thought. The reason dynastic thought is important is you either win or you get wiped out from history. Not killed, that's too easy, not executed, you are obliterated from history. There is no record of you even. You, your family, everyone who ever knew you is killed. And you are obliterated from history is the dynastic history of that. The combination of these basically means you must continue to strive and be the strongest, lead the nation toward excellence, or you will be erased from history. And so what is the impetus for China? Obviously, Xi benefits as the premier of China from a rising China. But I think talking about, I think, I forgot who it was talking about, you know, maybe if they really, I think it was Mike, talking about maybe if they really change it and there's a lot of difference. My worry is even if Xi for some reason woke up this morning and said, you know what, I've been kind of a cruel-hearted man, I'm gonna change everything. There's someone probably in that power structure that could supplant him because he became weak and he would annihilate Xi from history, and now we've got another leader and we're still barreling down the same route that we're on. And as Pete got, and what I want to keep foot stomping, the way you beat this is not, once again, Sun Tzu, you don't win 1,000 battles. That's not the height of excellence. The height of excellence is to win without fighting. And so how you beat that is you just are always dominant economically and positionally in the most critical domain, in my opinion, space, and is a continual struggle with China, at least until hopefully at some point, like the USSR, they collapse under their own weight.
Now, a lot of the
Yeah, I'd like to second that. You know, there's more than one way to win or lose, and you know, there's nothing saying that China has a monopoly on Sun Tzu's insights, right? We can play Go. We can adopt the insights of Sun Tzu as well. And you know, his core point is attack the enemy's or your adversary's strategy, right? Make sure you know what's going on. You've got excellent situation, and first go after their strategy. And luckily, their strategy is very overt. And so, I want to talk about some things that America is doing, you know, right. It took us a while to get in the game. I think, you know, Nami could talk to you about, you know, her earlier essays saying, look, China's got a clear plan. The United States has nothing. Well, you know, in the last year, so much has happened that is extremely positive. You know, we had a bipartisan consensus to build the Space Force. You know, we subsequently released through a very long process on the National Space Council an absolutely foundational, excellent document called A New Era in Space Exploration and Development, which for the first time ever, a White House document is talking about space settlement, space exploitation, space industrialization, and space economic development. I mean, that's huge. Till this year, the only thing we've ever talked about as a society is space exploration. We have never talked about a vision for space development, and it provides one. And, you know, that structure, you know, has been a backdrop. And, you know, sometimes we hear those same noises. Certainly we're hearing those noises repeated very strongly in the Department of Commerce, you know, from Secretary Ross, very strongly and articulately from Administrator Bridenstine, and sometimes from the Space Force, mostly through its documents, right? And, you know, the first time was the Future of Space 2060. It's just a brilliant report put out by the Space Force, available online. Then there's space power doctrine, particularly what you heard Nami say about about space security in particular. That was something us Blue Water advocates had been waiting for. And then, you know, just this week, this release of this NASA U.S. Space Force Memorandum of Understanding, and it is just dynamite. I mean, this thing talks about that we're going to cooperate on communications, navigation, assembling, manufacturing, you know, search and rescue of human spaceflight, logistical capability, space situational awareness out to cislunar. You know, it is a fundamentally enabling document. And for the first time ever I've seen in a government document, it states that the United States, you know, that the U.S. Space Force organizes and trains to defend vital interests beyond Earth orbit. So it is the first official, you know, acknowledgement that the United States has vital interests beyond Earth orbit. And I give them, you know, kudos. The other thing, you know, the State of the Space Industrial Base 2020, big deal. All these things happen, you know, this year. So in the last year, you've really seen America get its head in the game and start getting together and a get well action plan. And I think it's only going to get better.
So for context for folks, One, on our YouTube channel, on our Liftport YouTube channel at Liftport, we have a really long, I'll admit, deadly dull conversation, word for word sometimes, explanation of the New Era document that Pete just described. It's a 23-page document, and I swear, I'm not kidding at all. It is going to change the future. This one single document that has all of these ripple effects will change the future, and I'm so glad that we have this. And Sean and Pete and I were part of a event that the chief scientist of Space Force ran about a year ago. It wasn't Space Force yet; it was still Air Force Space Command. But we were a part of a, I would say, kind of, it was a many months of kind of internal conversations and then a few days of furious writing, where we looked at what does the future look like all the way out to 2060. And so the chief scientist of now U.S. Space Force commissioned that document, and it's really amazing.
And is that also on your website? Is
yeah,
that all on report.com?
Exactly. I actually told my guys by Monday, we're going to have a whole resource page. There's about 8 pivotal documents that have come out in the last, well, as Pete said, one came out the last week. They're coming out very quickly. As somebody who's been in this field for 20 years, I've never seen documents come out like this before. Never, ever. Sean was telling me earlier about, hey, there's some documents. For your fans from a couple days ago that asked specifically for Sean's thesis, even though he hasn't said a word tonight, he's a super smart guy and he should say something. We'll be posting.
You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, we'll be posting his thesis on our website. So look for that Monday. We're going to put a new section up called resources, and it'll have a whole set of papers and technical documents. They're worth reading, and I know I'm a nerd about this stuff, but I think the future depends on documents like this.
Yeah, and let me just point out too that you guys as the listeners, these are very approachable documents, right? And they're written for you, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the United States Space Force exists to serve you and your goals, as does the entire DoD. And so, we need an involved citizenry that knows what's up, that cares, and that's fluent. So, these documents aren't just, for academics. They are out there so that you, the citizens, can say, yeah, is that the future I want? Is that the Space Force I want? Are these guys on the right track? Because, bureaucracies, particularly in the United States, right, we exist to serve the people. And if we're not doing what you want, provide guidance, right? But these are important issues and something that is, within your reach to read and have an opinion on, and you should.
Awesome.
If I could
Excellent.
put in as well.
Absolutely, Josh.
Obviously I think last Wednesday we talked about the constant movement forward, the new frontier, the final frontier, you could even say. And ultimately, echoing Pete, and from looking at it from a strategic point of view, this is not a Space Force mission. This is a whole of society sort of mission.
Humanity.
It requires
humanity.
Popular imagination. It requires an unwavering support from the populace for generations. This is most likely, almost certainly a generational movement to the stars, and a generational, more than likely, conflict with potential bad actors attempting to exploit space for their own purposes. To put this in perspective, China is setting up monuments of space flight. They have a Mars space camp that they are sending students to out in the middle of a red desert to kind of simulate the environment.
Wow.
China is taking this very seriously from the very earliest stages to, it's maybe a bit strong a word, to breed a population that wants space dominance and space exploitation. And America cannot afford to be second in this race.
Nope,
Yeah.
I agree. You hear that, everybody? Do you hear that? We need to get into that competitive spirit,
Yeah.
you know. And actually, that kind of leads me into one of the questions that I had set aside. How do we How do we achieve peaceful competition? Is that possible? Is that a thing that we can do? Because that's what we all want as Americans. At least, you know what? Just myself. That's really all I can speak about. So that's what I want: peaceful competition. Is that achievable?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I, yeah, sorry, if I
I
may.
like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that is absolutely possible. So I'll give you an example of how China's done that. So one way China has undermined US global presence this time peacefully, with not many of us noticing, is that it has established its independent BIDO navigation system. So if you look at the rationale for BIDO, it's basically offered as an alternative to the United States Space Force maintained global positioning system. And
Okay.
it's so interesting because now what they are doing is that they have offered that particular independent navigation system to the members of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, why do I say that this is peaceful competition? It's peaceful competition because it might not lead to what Peter said, that it'll inspire humanity and all of us will innovate. But what it does is that it undermines US power projection capability peacefully. So
Yeah.
because we know today from COVID-19 that we are dependent on space-based assets, GPS is very important for us for navigation purposes, for almost everything that we do virtually. China is the leader of undersea cables today. It's become the leader of ground solar. It's become the lead actor in investing in far exponential technologies like artificial intelligence. China is the lead actor in quantum. They are the first country to test a satellite that is a quantum satellite, which is unhackable, the Mischius, which is named after a wise Chinese mathematician, an ancient actor. So you can see that how you can compete peacefully. And what is so interesting in peaceful competition is that it's sometimes not really realized by the society that it's targeted at. So you don't have this conversation.
Until it's too late. See,
Yes,
they're peaceful now,
yes,
so but that all I can see is them prepping to
yeah,
not be peaceful anymore.
yeah,
So
Well,
because, yeah,
So, Adam, on that note, right? So, the fundamental way is, you know, you've got to stand up to bullies,
agreed.
right? So, who do bullies pick on, right? They pick on the weak, right? There's violence between bullies and the
Yep.
weak. But the folks that stand up early, right, at the earliest teachable moment and say, that's not going to fly here, right? These are the rules. You treat me with respect, or there's going to be a problem, right? That tends not to escalate. Bullies tend to behave when they're in a community of folks that stand up to them. So the
Until a
primary,
bully Hold on, until a bully learns how to manipulate and bully their way in a new fashion. That's what I see China's doing right now. Essentially a bully that's learned how to have this mask of, I'm no longer a bully. I'm helping, I'm trying to help everyone now. I'm trying to, I while in the backgrounds they're at the top of the undersea cables and the ground solar systems. They've been building up their own power while showing everyone else.
right?
Look at what they're doing. They took Tibet, they took Hong Kong, they took the East. I forget the name of the country, but the whole Uyghur population that's happening in China right now. It's like, they're bullying. They even tried to take a town in Russia, and I don't really know what's going on with the Russia and China alliance that I actually I didn't know about until just now. But we see them kind of, and you even mentioned yesterday that they arrested that the
the Hong
leader
Kong
of,
protesters, yeah, the
right,
democratic
right,
protesters.
exactly. So it feels like they're upping their bullying a little bit, just
Yeah.
a
Well, you're
little
right,
bit.
Adam. Right, and this is the problem, for America, right? You know, we know how we are, and we tend to project, our own standards onto others, and we want to believe the best about others, and we're very slow, to figure this out. But at some point in time, and you've really seen a huge change in the last year, and in the last year, you've seen a lot of the elite on both sides of the aisle in DC wake up to the fact that China is a cheater, and they're not changing. At least they're not changing under the current policy, and that we have to look for this, as you say, in different ways of manipulation and try to counter it. And when I was significantly younger, I had a martial arts teacher that sort of explained that there were three types of people. Okay. He said, you've got sheep, you've got wolves, and of course you can have wolves that pretend they're sheep, right? And then you've got sheepdogs. And for whatever crazy reason, sheepdogs like sheep. They could eat them, they don't. And they protect it, right? And so, the United States is called to play a role of sheepdog, and so is the Space Force. And to the extent that there is somebody who will meet a bully, who will meet a predator or an attempted predation, and show its fangs and say, I'm here, everything's going to be fine. But if we relax and we want to leave the sheep to themselves, whether that's our commercial industry or that's our allies, right? Bullies and sheep, wolves and sheep, or bullies and the weak, we know how that's going to play out.
Yep.
Yeah, if I could put in too, I want to make sure that it's clear. We were talking about kind of what the U.S. goal was. We hit on the China goal, but not distinctly. And I mean, just to be really clear, we're not talking Red Dawn here. I mean, China, which by the way, actually, the remake, interestingly enough, it was North Korea in the remake. It was originally going to be China, and China, if I recall correctly, threatened to boycott the movie. And
Hollywood, huh? Hollywood,
yeah,
right?
So it was North Korea, which makes very, very little sense. There's no way. North Korea is not projecting force to the mainland of the United States, but that's a whole different matter. But China is not looking to start a war to take over the United States by force. That is almost certainly not their objective. Their objective is to establish,
because they know it's not possible.
Even if it was, let's just say that it was, somehow they take over all of space and they have the resources of the Imperial Empire, right? Or the Empire from Star Wars.
And they don't need to.
They still wouldn't, I don't think, because we still have some, we might not be able to stop them, but we certainly have sufficient capability to do incredible amounts of damage. They don't have to. The job is not, they're not trying to kill us in a national sense. They're trying to lock us in a cage.
Yeah, they're trying to take us over from the inside. That's why a lot of people are talking about how, we just broke out Hollywood, for example, like the actors that are paid millions of dollars and the politicians that may or may not have, China in their pocket or be in China's pocket. It's like a lot of people believe that that's the case. A lot of different politicians out there. Now, I don't want to get political, but, it is fairly political space. It is the future.
Adam, wait, Peter, just pause for a second. I really want, Adam, a moment ago, you just asked, basically you said, well, they couldn't beat us. And all the pros on your panel just paused for a second.
Militarily.
No, right. That's what I want to answer, because I think something just kind of slid right past here for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to talk about how fragile the system is, right? It's layers on layers and layers and layers and layers of systems. And when you have that level of complexity, if something breaks down here, it has all these cascading effects up above. So do you like that Amazon can deliver a package in 24 hours? Do you like that that Uber can find where you are and get you where you want to go? Do you like that kind of that kind of service depends on just less than 3 dozen satellites that float over the sky? Your phone can see 6 of them at any one moment, and they're very easy to knock out. They're very fragile.
So do I like it? Do I like that? Actually, no, I don't, because we talked about this earlier about how Americans get comfortable, they get complacent, they get lazy. So we're not looking to seek to go to the stars anymore, because we can pick up a phone and get Amazon over here in 24 hours, anything we want. We can order anything on the internet. So there is a problem with actually having that much access.
Do you like having your ATM card work? Because ATMs are based off of satellite comms and timing. Okay.
Well, do I like the way society is? Absolutely.
All right.
course.
So what I'm trying to say is that society that we live in is very, very dependent on this very fragile system of satellites.
Right.
There's roughly 3,600 satellites in the sky. We own and control the vast majority of them. And because they're very fragile, they're physically very, very fragile. Just a little bit of sand can destroy a satellite very easily. And there's lots of grains of sand up there. And so here we have this situation where as the satellite is moving around the world, and China has already proven that they can knock a satellite out of the sky, as it's coming around the world, it's very predictable where it's going to be, when it's going to be there, and you can knock it out of the sky. And the next one comes around, you knock it out of the sky. The next one comes around, and you knock it out of the sky. You can end the global satellite network in about 90, maybe 110 minutes.
Okay, so you're saying that we're
110 minutes.
We're significantly more susceptible than
exactly. And when that happens, if that were to happen, the Western civilization that we basically take for granted comes to a screeching halt. Right. Okay. So I don't want you to think it's that they can't harm us. They very much can harm us. Will they win? No, probably not. But they can harm our national economy in 90 minutes. And that's kind of what the meeting was about early this morning, that blue versus brown mentality. All of us in the call are like looking into the future, but there's a real problem that's facing us right now. So don't.
Well, that's why you yourself said you were very blue.
Yeah,
and then over the past few years, you really shifted to, I think you said like 85 85% blue or brown water now, because you
I'm actually
really are registering. You're seeing how much of an importance it is having control over those kind of situations, and I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, so I don't want you to misread the situation, right? We're all pros in this conversation, and we're aware of the fragility of the system. It's working now, but it doesn't take much to sabotage it.
Yeah, if I may add to that. So China woke up to U.S. space capacity during the 1991 Gulf War. So they saw that the Gulf War was the first space-based supported war, command and control, precision navigation, enable missile. And so what the Chinese PLA then ran this whole series of conversations in their Academy of Military Sciences. And then the biggest lesson they came out with is that when it comes to conventional parity, China does not stand a chance with the US. Of course, as Josh mentioned, you have nuclear weapons. Both countries are nuclear weapon states. So there is a systemic stability at the level of the system. But then one of the Chinese thinkers said that the biggest vulnerability of the US military is it's dependent on its satellite support systems. And so if we can demonstrate that we can target that by, say, their anti-satellite weapon that they demonstrated in 2007, by jamming, by laser beaming, that makes the US military nervous, and it has. And so I think that's an important insight that comes out from their own conversations. Now, what is interesting is that Peter talked about the concept of the bully. You were talking about whether the US is able to maneuver in this space. I would say that the different world that the United States and China exist today is that we have a very attentive international audience that's watching both China and the US. Now, what China has done very effectively, which I spoke in your previous program, was that it has been able to establish alliances on its own. We say that it's only allied with North Korea, Laos, but actually it has developed membership based on economic incentives through Belt and Road. It is very active in the United Nations General Assembly. It's a permanent member of the UN Security Council, which it joined in 1972, which gives it veto power over any actions against it or its allies like Burma, which it has constantly done, or North Korea. And so what China has done is that it has actually limited US diplomatic military capability to actually maneuver in the system that Michael was talking about. So in the system, China has actually limited US capability for punishment. So when does a country behave in a manner that appears like a bully or illegally? China uses lawfare a lot, the use of legal mechanisms to make its point of view, including the South China Sea. So the country would do that by deliberately engaging in actions, for instance, hardening of islands in the South China Sea to demonstrate to, say, a country like Philippines, which is a US ally, Japan, which is a US ally, Vietnam, which is a US strategic partner, that look, I can go ahead and harden the islands in the South China Sea, which you also claim, and guess what? I face no consequences. So the US, despite having such a strong military and actually patrolling the Pacific, very close to the South China Sea, is unable to respond since 2013. And guess what that does? That undermines credibility as well. And so you see they're playing the game without war, as Josh has been mentioning many times, but with the use of activities that actually bring down US credibility in terms of its own alliance systems. And so that's a very long game, and it's willing to play that game.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
putting in the bully combination or the bully imagery. You have the new bully, and you have the old strong guy, the United States, and the new bully's going up, and he's coming up to someone else that this other guy's friends with, and he's beating up that guy. He's not going to beat up the big guy because he knows darn well what's going to happen. He does that, but he's beating up the other guy. He's willing to do that. But talking about generating a war or even God forbid, a nuclear exchange, that would be the equivalent to trying to become the new bully, but burning the house down in the process. At the end of the day, that China doesn't want that, and the United States doesn't want that. And so, can there, basically back to your original question, can there be peaceful competition? I think both sides ultimately want peaceful competition. Neither side is looking for a shooting war in this idea of like a World War III. I think China is willing to engage in fourth generation limited violence for the application of terrorism, essentially, or manipulation, coercion, but they're not looking for a shooting war, and the United States definitely isn't looking for one.
But China has admitted
play fair, and China just refuses to.
Yeah, but haven't they admitted that they want to control everything, though?
Wanting to control something and going to war to achieve it are two different things.
But war is in the traditional sense is different, though. They wouldn't do that in the traditional sense. It's going to be different. They're gonna pay off politicians. They're gonna take over small countries here and there around the globe slowly and surely, and then eventually take over.
Well, and even a big country. So, for instance,
even a big country.
Yeah, well, looking at the United States, for instance. So
exactly.
They went into Africa a few years ago and basically bought up almost all of the natural resources. They were just buying stuff left and right. A lot of this is rare earth metals. These are very critical for instance, computer parts.
Yep.
And so once they secured all of those, well, guess what? Now, if you are a developed nation and you perhaps are standing against them, you know what? Maybe we don't need to be exporting that critical piece of infrastructure to your country. The United States plays this too. We, for instance, banned the selling of them of some part or raw material that basically ground one of their largest phone producers to a halt because of the COVID and all of the other things going on. It is possible for both of us at this point to exchange peaceful economic force, for lack of a better word, to try to influence the other one, to coerce them into behaving better.
Yep.
But China is more than willing to do this with other nations around them in Asia, Africa, Europe, etc. Russia, we haven't talked about Russia much, but they've threatened to do similar things because all of the natural gas that keeps Europe warm in the winter comes basically through Ukraine from Russia. Russia could theoretically threaten to cut that off if there's really a significant political issue there.
Wow.
Yeah, I think what China has done very successfully, I think to answer your question, have they stated that they want to control everything? They don't use the word control. they use the word more attractive, ideology,
Of
attractive
course.
alignments. And
Sure.
so this became very obvious with, as I mentioned, with President Xi Jinping's speech, the China Dream in 2013. I
This
was
is
in
what I'm
India.
referring to. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when I was in India at the time, my Chinese scholar colleague came and said, I want to give a speech to my Indian audience about China's China Dream, which is the more attractive dream for a country, especially developing countries, if they want to develop themselves. China is willing to invest in their infrastructure. You are low in your infrastructure. And so it's very interesting. It's a very clever, strategic way of offering a China-led world order where everybody benefits, right? And the interesting thing is that at that
Yeah.
time,
Thank you, Josh.
if you
Everybody benefits.
yes, and so in
Somewhat.
20 and so how is sometimes the US has actually helped that particular narrative, and I have to say that because when in 2017 President Trump started his first term, he was very insistent on the America First policy. And for many known reasons, for his own voter base, for his own conceptualization of American foreign policy. But what it did is that what was interesting was that at that exact time, the Chinese President Xi, went to the World Economic Forum and gave a speech that America wants to be America first, but China is the country that will maintain the international system and keep it peaceful. And it'll never be China first. It'll be
Well, that's because
China with others.
that's
So,
because
so
Trump wasn't supposed to win. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish what you're
yeah,
saying.
yes, but my point is that it's very strategic of them to pick up on a particular conversation happening within the U.S. and then project it to the world to their advantage. So
They had to.
yeah, they had to, but not just they had to. Many countries bought it. So if you look at the General Assembly, the African Union countries, the Asian countries actually listened to that speech and thought that maybe there is a point there. And so it's a very, as Michael was mentioning, it's a very complicated strategic world that we are in today. And so signaling, communication of intent, and so the corrections that NASA, as for instance, the Artemis Accord does, that it wants to establish cooperative relationship vis-a-vis the moon. We're not doing it alone. We're actually doing it in partnership with others. Those are fantastic statements that build that particular alignment structure.
Our statements to the world as invitations
Yes.
to please join us on this grand adventure, right?
Yeah.
That's what we were signaling with these documents. It really was an international invitation. It says we're going to the moon. We have nearly 40 missions planned over the next 10 years. We went from zero. We haven't been back to the moon in literally decades. We didn't do anything, and then all of a sudden there's this new decision that says we're going back to the moon. We're going to send a woman to the moon because that first matters. And we're going to go back, not just flags and footprints anymore, but we're going to go back with academia, with civil whole of government approach, with not just NASA, but NASA, NOAA, DOE, Department of Energy. We're gonna partner with Space Force. We're going to go out there commercially. I mean, I did a word cloud of the New Era document that I referenced a little while ago, and it has hundreds of different flavors of commercial or commercially led or investor or partner, or it has that language just absolutely on every single page over and over and over again. And when we announced the Artemis Accords, there was a pretty strong interest because what we said was, we're going to the moon, we're going to develop it, we're going to do it commercially, and we really like our long-term allies to come along on this ride with us because everybody's going to win. They're going to win economically, they're going to win academically, we're going to learn things along the way, and as we learn those things, we're going to use that knowledge to make living on Earth a better place. So
and that's the new war right there, is China taking the Artemis Accords, taking President Trump's America First policies, which was which was about, I mean, we don't have manufacturing here anymore. It was about, giving jobs to the American people or rather just giving purpose to the American people, which the Artemis Accords then is, of course, getting that, because if we do go to the moon, if we do create this entire new,
we call it the cislunar econosphere. Like
okay.
Unpack that for a second. The cislunar econosphere, here's the moon, here's the Earth.
Yeah. Hold on. I want to get my point across. What I was about to say.
Yeah.
All right. So then China goes around talking about, look at how selfish they are. It's all just America now. Listen to me. We're the good country that will expand with everyone. But then you really look at it. It honestly, it just reminds me of fake news where they're clipping out of context, giving you a little clip of it and going, this is bad. Instead of going, oh, they're actually going to commercialize everything and bring all their partners along and want to actually communicate with everybody and bring everyone along. Go ahead, Josh.
2 seconds. I'm sorry, Mike, but I just wrap up the China reacting to Artemis. So my own personal opinion, China is terrified of the Artemis Accords.
They should be.
Not surprising.
Yeah. The head of the CNSA, the Chinese National Space Law Center, penned an article, I believe within the last 2 months, basically coming out and going down the line and basically trying to tear at the Artemis Accords. What's really interesting and using very strident language like this is just the United States trying to take over and all of this sort of stuff. The United States is a bad actor, etc. What's really interesting though, you get to the very end of the article, he says this is a way that they can use to exclude China. And that is ultimately,
you could skip the whole paper. Just read that line.
Yeah, just that one line. That's really what he's saying. So that the whole article is just, it's much less obvious the whole rest of the time. But what this is a war between competing ideologies, competing world orders.
Yep,
for
exactly.
alliance and for economic benefit. And that is the race to the moon. And that is what Mike is talking about with the cislunar econosphere. Take it away, Mike.
Right. So it's the idea that currently, and we were reminded earlier today, that the economy of space right now is exclusively in the realm of ones and zeros. It's just data moving from where it is to where it needs to be. It's taking pictures. It's moving, the sound of our voice. It's data. It's ones and zeros. That's where we are today, and we're going to be that way for a little while longer, right? They are developing manufacturing in space. There are programs and companies made in space that are creating products that will be developed there and shipped down to Earth. But that's a super, super small number right now. What's important is that it's exponential. So it starts out low, and you can barely see it for a little while, and then it goes like that, right? Yep. And so where we are is by planting these 3,600 seeds of commercial development, that is the beginning of us making our first steps, right? And as that exponential curve climbs faster and faster, we will then, instead of the cislunar econosphere being dependent on data and ones and zeros, we will eventually have our own construction sites. We're going to build the stuff that Peter was talking about last week with space-based solar power. We're going to build, our lunar elevator. Sean has a whole bunch of stuff that they're going to build, in his paper. That stuff is happening, and the thing is that you can't put that genie back in the bottle. It doesn't matter how much China doesn't like this plan. It's too damn bad, and it's too damn late. Right on. So what was one of the things that came up in the conversation this morning, was that the war for space, and I'm going to use that word on purpose, the war for space is really a conflict of economic ideologies. It's a way of acting, and it is a way of developing that a confined single-party state simply doesn't have, I'm going to call it the imagination, to react to all the different things that we're going to do. We're just throwing spaghetti, right? Something on the wall is going to stick.
Yep.
Not all of it is, but something is. And then once it's on the wall, then we're going to do other new things with it. That becomes infrastructure assets that we just, again, layer. And they don't necessarily exhibit that kind of creative resiliency against a system like ours. So I don't want to sit here.
Michael, that is only true
Okay.
if you've got adequate policy focus. Yes,
Correct.
we've got a tremendous engine for innovation and parallel development and rapid production and efficient use. But I mean, let's take a look. I mean, China, they won the 5G battle, right? They won it outright, right?
Yep.
We could have done something,
Yep.
but we didn't have a policy. We weren't even looking. It snuck up behind us. They're doing great on AI. They're doing great on big data. They're doing great on quantum. China is not some second rate, right?
No.
They are a true peer. And if we are not, keeping our eye on the ball, and it isn't just industry by itself, right? Because if they're going to use mercantilist predatory practices, and they're going to strong arm, all of our partners to say, either with debt diplomacy or, with, sweet deals or corrupting officials, right? There are so many ways that, it is not a pure market. And, we are postured to win in a fair trade, pure market.
Yeah.
But if we don't have the government policy backing it up, making sure we're pointing industry to what is strategic, right? I don't expect industry to know, what United States equities are. Somebody has to be looking out for national security and communicating that as a matter of policy to industry. Laissez-faire won't work if you've got a predator in the room.
Well,
so, we cannot, yes, America has everything it needs to compete, but we, the American people, have to be absolutely clear about where we want to compete, and we have to get our head in the game.
Yeah, I agree. So we don't have. Hold on. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So I know that we could keep going. Michael, I know you've got a lot to say, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. I do think it's been a wonderful conversation so far. I have a bunch of super chats I got to read. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to get into the super chats. Before I do, I just want to say thank you for each and every one of you for joining. It's been a wonderful conversation, and So this is from Purdy Princess. Adam, sorry about my harsh super chat the other day. It's been a hard year for me. A lot of death in my family. Please play a happy song next Friday. Absolutely. I don't remember any harsh super chats, so don't sweat it at all. Jason asks, did you move with Tim or stay behind? I'm currently still behind. Batgoat says, spin it. I will do that. Purdy Princess, you sent this same super chat. Don't worry about it. I don't know what you're stressing about. I don't hold grudges, so it's all good. And Yoder says, love the show, Adam. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Second Fleet Actual says Beijing needs an orbital kinetic energy weapon. I don't know if they need it or they might have it. I don't know if that's what we need. But anyway, the Gray Gamer says down with the CCP. Well, that's certainly your opinion. I do have my own reservations about them as well. Swiftner Braveheart says, question to the guests. Game theory writ large appears to study competition, negotiation, and conflict. What are China's best, worst, and most likely space course of action in the near and distant futures? That is a question for you, Sean. You said something there. You want to respond to this?
That really speaks to me that that's the wavelength I've been on this whole night. So read those to me again. Best, worst, and what case?
All right. So
best, worst, most likely.
Best, worst, and most likely
from China's perspective.
Yeah, their course of action.
Yeah. So just to sum up again, everything that you've heard the other speakers tonight, and again, I didn't speak up because they were saying exactly what I was going to say, and they said it better. But the way that I've imagined this whole conversation, and kind of again what you heard is the way that essentially United States doctrine, the U.S. Navy in particular, and previous theorists and authors have spoken about how the Navy views it and how it essentially, I think the Blue Water community looks at this. There's what we call command of space. And command is essentially the combination of presence, coercion, and force. And if you want to think about it in terms of energy or just, Boyd and the dogfighting and energy maneuverability diagrams, China always operates below the threshold that they think that they're going to get our attention, wake us up, and bring us into a hot conflict. Like that's basically their calculus. So as long as they can make any maneuver writ large across their spectrum, their instruments of national power, they are going to pay very close attention to our reactions. Do we react to what they're doing? And if they don't get the reaction, or if they do get the reaction that they want, which is no reaction, they're just going to keep going.
Yep.
So their best case is to keep pushing below the threshold of armed conflict in such a way that they know exactly where the barbed wire is, and they're just going to go right underneath that to get exactly what their end game is. And if that means getting the moon and then Mars, they're going to approach their path and their national strategy in that way. That's their best case. Their worst case is if they miscalculate and they bring us into something, or we take notice, which is what we're trying to get the nation to be aware of already, that this is happening, that's their modus operandi. And the worst case is that we basically overtake them. We, if you're using martial arts, we throw them and pin them to the mat because they miscalculated, they misstepped, and then we suddenly got them and we're in the position of strength and we're actively aware that we're in a conflict at that point. And then the most likely is they are going to realize at some point that we are onto them, which is what this conversation is about right now, that we are actively trying to have this grand strategy. Yep. We have all of these documents coming out. We are catching up. We are waking up. We are doing all of these things. The most likely, I think, is there is going to be a much shorter path to this peaceful competition that everybody thinks is most likely and desirable. It's going to happen in the form of, in the next 5 years, you're going to see the Space Force essentially realize that its mission isn't necessarily about preventing wars. It's more about promoting commerce. It's about promoting this economic sense of warfare, not the true military, traditional sense of warfare, because that is how the Space Force can do the best bang for its buck. That's where its mission sets. If it tailors and adjusts its strategy right, that is where Space Force can do the most good for the nation. So that whole being said, like that's how those three things play out, because it's all a sense of how well does China understand what our threshold is? Will they miscalculate? And how quickly can we wake up to the fact that that's exactly what they're doing? I think I answered that question.
Excellent. Jacobus says, end the space treaty of 1967. What is that? Anybody know the
outer space treaty?
That's the original one.
The outer space treaty, yeah.
Okay. Well, and hopefully everyone adheres to it. This is from.
I actually strongly disagree with this one. Yeah. We should not end it, but it is becoming accidentally obsolete, right? That
So amend it.
Well, no, I think it just doesn't matter anymore. There are pieces that are super useful. We don't want to just give up on this thing. There's definitely value there. But what's happened is when they wrote it 50 years ago, they didn't imagine the Buck Rogers era that we're in now. And so there's a lot of stuff that just simply has been missed. It's not in the document, so you can kind of do what you want to do, because what's that, Pete? What is that?
50 years outer space treaty.
Nice.
Nice. We keep moving here. John says, question from Purdy Princess. Who will speak for the downtrodden in China's death camps? Who will speak for them in this stream? $5 down on Adam speaking out for them while all guests pretend death camps aren't real. I did bring them up earlier.
We talked about them today.
We did talk about that. Well, remember, this is from over an hour ago. This is almost an hour and a half now. So, I mean, I did talk about them, and it is something that a lot of people aren't talking about. It isn't mainstream media. It's all the election now in America. That's all it is. It's all either you're anti-Biden or you're anti-Trump, and that's literally the news. So it's a shame. Purdy Princess again here. China uses peaceful strategy, yet has death camps.
Sorry, I think we're going to go on record saying that we think that what's going on over there is terrible, and we have used it during tonight's conversation as one of the reasons why we don't trust lying, cheating, stealing China, right? That is an example that we use this evening about why we don't like this.
That's for you, Purdy Princess. I'm sure. I'm assuming you're still listening. You know, we condemn that.
Yeah.
I don't think China's peaceful. I'm fearful of China. I think they're actually trying to undermine all like democracy, essentially constitutional republics, because we are standing in their way of their what is it? Their beautiful vision, right? Or how did you put? What is their how do they put it, Namri? No, their
the China dream.
The China dream. We are standing in their way, and I will proudly stand.
We will
in their path.
always stand in the way.
Awesome. So just to make that clear, this is about we could that's a subject that we could talk about for a lot, but that's not what we're focused on. We're focused on space. So yes, I did bring them up, So anyway, let's keep moving on. Hydro says, "What do you guys think of the Great White Hope?" And then in parentheses, the President Donald Trump. I guess that's for all of you. What do you guys think of President Trump? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but if you want to, go ahead.
Yeah, obviously a touchy political subject. If nothing else,
indeed,
we're still keeping it on space. I mean, the president that signed the space presidential directives founded the Space Force.
Yes, he did.
I got nothing but positive things to say in that respect. I mean,
yeah.
One could even say possibly.
Yeah, I would second that, because if you, in fact, Peter was saying, I wrote a piece in the Washington Post saying that America has an incoherent space vision, not clear where it's going 2 years back. And I repeated that in the Space Review. And I'm very pleased to see that in the last few years, you have 5 space policy directives that talks about looking at space from a long-term vision. You have President Trump sign an executive order on April 6th, where he actually talks about American citizens utilizing the resources in space, and actually also pointing out that the Moon Treaty is not what the Americans would treat as customary law, which needed to be done, because if you do not keep silent on the Moon Treaty, it becomes customary law. And I think if you look at that itself and the vision document that came out, which Peter was mentioning, on the new era of space development, those are fascinating and very, very critical documents. The hope is that it'll have bipartisan continuation, because that will be required for America's space future.
Agreed. This is from Superman. If he wasn't scared of green rocks, shout out to chat. I see the love you guys are sharing, and I have to say it's heartwarming. Smash that like button. Come on, smash it. You guys, can you all say at the same time, smash that like button?
Smash that like button.
Yes, that was so awkwardly awesome.
We're nerds. You knew we were nerds when you asked us on this show. We're all
That's great. I love it.
We can't really coordinate high fives either.
All right, and spin the UFO. This is for the fans being out of this world. I love that. Love that. Thank you, Superman. Great show, everyone. He says, appreciate you, Superman. Always hitting me up with the super chats. Swiftner says, mad props, Adam. I love this dialogue. Much thanks to these SMEs. Please, a follow-up question to guest. What is a low probability, high consequence black swan space event that could reset competitor strategies?
Oh my God, we all have one. Pete, I want you to answer this because yours is the spookiest.
Pete's got the spookiest one?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, if we had an asteroid or long period comet heading our way, that would bring us together, like nothing. But there are others that are much lower than that. Like, the United States and China look at things very differently. If you, for instance, saw a minor space war between the two Koreas, for instance, something like that, that caused a bunch of space debris, could really alter things. You could have something like a Cuban Missile Crisis where one party puts something up, or you could just have something that horrifies the world, where like North Korea, put a high altitude nuclear detonation in space, killed a bunch of people in space hotels. Those type of things could really matter. And then I think for the Space Force, just having human beings, American citizens in space, is going to be a pretty black swan event for them. I don't think they're planning that. but they're really going to have to wonder, when they get the call saying help with rescue,
Yep.
and they haven't planned for that. I think that'll be a pretty big surprise.
Thank you. All right, this is from iHydro. Check out the game Space Engineers. You may like it. Yeah, I'll check it out. Sounds good. Saint Trilby says, any thoughts on phosphine on Venus? How would extant life on other planets affect our colonization efforts? Yeah, we didn't even talk about the whole Venus thing.
All right, so I'm going to tell you an email that I sent to family, just a personal message, and I said, not the election, not the fires, not the pandemic, not civil unrest. The story that will define 2020, 100 years from now, 50 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 2020 is going to be the year where they found life.
Well, they haven't found it yet.
No,
I know. It's just conjecture right now. I got to tell you, that just set my heart just pounding.
It is pretty exciting stuff.
Because
they can't prove that it isn't life. That's the cool part about it.
Right. So I actually had my eye on Enceladus for a long time. I am stunned by Venus. I don't know how to register on it. It was amazing.
I was caught off guard. And that's not to rule out the moons that are out there.
That is the defining story of 2020. I don't care what else has happened, what happens next. 2020, they found life.
This is from one of my favorite super chatters. This is from IB Rippenham. Says China can't win a fart war with America. All right. And not if I'm at the front lines. Zedazan says, I want to be a space pirate. Good. Don't we all want to be space pirates? I mean, it's kind of cool. A cool thought process, to be a space pirate.
Actually, I can put on real quick.
Sure, Josh, what's up?
Just to be really clear, we already have space piracy. They're not, flying around in ships with the Jolly Roger and the eye patch, but they already have satellites that are pirating bandwidth, even while we're just sharing stuff in orbit. So there is already space pirates. That's just not quite as cool as we imagined they'd be.
All right. Interesting, though. That's cool. Stephen Jones says, can Sean have a chance to speak?
Please.
Well, shout out to Sean.
Yeah, the technical stuff really didn't come up in this conversation. That's fine. It was a lot more geopolitical, and you had the right SMEs that were definitely more suited for the way the conversation flow went. I tend to be more technical with a solid background in space domain awareness. I kind of have a strong interest in the economics too, which again, we kind of got into a bit, and I love game theory, but we were talking about other stuff tonight. So that's why it didn't quite naturally flow in. That's all. I don't feel bad.
I want to tell a story about Sean. I want to tell a story about Sean. Sean, I have known for a long time. And from our other shows, we talked about my work in the space elevator. And we were at a conference. We were at a technical conference. And he stands up in the middle of this thing and he says, I want to be the Colonel Rhodes to your space elevator program. And if anybody is an Iron Man nerd, that's the reference, right? He wants to be the guy who leads big ideas in development of space. So hats off to Sean. He might have been pretty quiet today, but I have a lot of respect for this guy.
Yeah, and maybe that's just because in this case, kind of the roles are reversed. So typically in military circles, when I'm in uniform, I'm there advocating for you guys, but in this show, it's more like the other way around. You guys are all advocating for what you want the military to do, and I'm just listening. I'm just in the room, you guys are on the right track.
Well, that's good. That's a good thing. Let's see. The Illusionist says, do you mean that you're out of time, hippie YouTuber? Well, some of us aren't all on the same time zone, so we do have to adhere to some people's time schedules.
Sean, what time is it for you?
It's 4 a.m. for me. But
yeah,
that's
it's
fine.
4 a.m. for Sean. Thank you for showing up. Even though it turns out you didn't speak much tonight. Death by thank you maybe. How vulnerable would a moon settlement be if a hostile nation took over the Lift Corp space elevator in the It's actually not in the McClain line, but he says the space elevator in the McClain line for Sean and Michael. I like that. This person was paying attention.
They're paying attention. Hell yeah, right on.
I like that. I like that.
Who was that? Who's the shout out to?
This is from well, it's for Sean and Michael, but let's give it to Sean. I'll read the question again. How vulnerable would a moon settlement be if a hostile nation took over the Lift Corp space elevator in the McClain line?
So I don't.
Well, just
okay.
so from what I understand about what the McClain line is, right? It's everything that is. There's a circle that's showing.
There's a circle. Okay.
I don't have the picture. I wish I did.
That's fine. So if I understand the question, they're basically asking, what would we do if there was an issue with a hostile takeover on a lunar settlement near, we'll say, where the lift port station on the moon is?
Well, if they took over the lift core station.
Yeah, they capture the moon elevator, and we've got a settlement there. How vulnerable is that settlement? What's going to happen?
Well, if they got there, then they clearly got past whatever security defenses we had. So I'm guessing there's not a whole lot we have at that point, or they snuck around us and we got to maneuver and get stuff in.
Yeah.
This goes into kind of what Michael brought up during the discussion today. You've got this, it's what I call Rubik's Cube or three-sided problem with, your capability, your time frame, and then your regime. Where within that three-sided problem are you concentrating your focus of effort, your lines of effort, your resources? If by the time frame that you're proposing that this lunar settlement was set up and we, Space Force, USA, our allies, we didn't put forth any kind of security platform, craft, force, capabilities, whatever, then there's nothing we can really do.
Yeah.
Which is going back to why we were having this conversation. Like this is a perfect example of why, even though, or it might even be considered a black swan event or a minor black swan event, it's something that most people probably wouldn't think of, very few people would think of. This is why you need certain capabilities to ensure that if this type of event happens, there's some playbook that you can pull off the shelf that you dust off and you actually have the capabilities to follow through with whatever that plan is.
Yep.
That's the whole focus of where we're talking about with this future course design and trying to have the right stuff at the right time for the right problems. So as long as we can foresee these problems, we can design the requirements to bake in the capabilities at that future time scale, future time epoch. Yeah, if we had the right stuff, then hopefully we would be able to execute the right rescue plan. But if we don't have the capabilities, then there's not a whole lot we can do. Maybe China would come in to take it if they had the right stuff.
Right. So this is from Tyler. Says, are there any preemptive plans of what to do if colonies demand independence once they're self-sufficient? Or is that too far in the future yet? That's an interesting question.
I think that's very far in the future.
Yeah.
As much as I want that environment where we move to an independent Mars and an independent space stations and the independent moon. That is probably very, very far in the future. Think about okay, so let's just say, pretend we have 100,000 people on the moon. 100,000 seems like a lot, but they can't invent a new iPhone with only 100,000 people. They couldn't manufacture a new iPhone. So that colony, and I use that word on purpose, although it's not a great term in this case. That settlement is going to be it's going to be a very, very long time before they have the creature comforts that we're used to down here on the ground, right? So independence is a really it's a hard goal to hit for a really long time.
So
though it's never too early to think about what's right.
Right.
And at some point in time, right, I think the goal is to be able to be multiplanetary, and then you have to think about that. And I have thought about that. At that time, and I do think we're probably talking about, a couple hundred years, more than 100, but, that's not that far off in the future. Nation states, persist that long. And, we have the Outer Space Treaty does some things that on the surface, would make this very hard. But the Outer Space Treaty also incorporates the UN Charter, and the UN Charter has a way to create protectorates and grant independent, political rights. And we do know that in the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is not exactly law, but it has tremendous, moral and ideational force. It says that all human beings, have a right to their own governments, to political representation and to property. So my hope, would be that if and when, we get to a point where people have that we would extend to them the same kind of liberty that we ourselves as a nation thought was legitimate, and that we would not hold up the possibility, of political autonomy and the type of rights that we enshrine in our Constitution for all human beings. I don't think we'd want, a settlement or a colony of slaves that had no, political freedom. We didn't think that was good for America, and I wouldn't think that would be good, for hopefully, grandchildren of my children out there on Mars or in the asteroid belt.
Right on. All right, this is from Kay. Hey, Adam, question for everyone. Why did it seem that the Democrats gave up on space? Any thoughts? I know I have an opinion on this, but I want to kind of hear what you guys have to say.
Well, first of all, we don't completely, if we're talking about the future and in the election, we don't really know. I will, note that President Trump and his team didn't say a lot about space beforehand.
That's a
But
good point.
wow, have they done an amazing job. 5
Yes.
space policy directives,
Yep.
and
Space
a
Force.
new national space, vision, a
Mhm.
Space Force, right? So we can't know for sure, what the Democrats will do. Some of the Democrats are pretty hawkish. It is true, that there was a time, like for instance, this book, fantastic book on the story of the nuclear rocket, right? At the time that this was being done, like in the late 60s, early 70s, it was actually, Democratic congressmen that were pushing what was the most advanced technology and really looking for American primacy. So, we don't know. If there's a change, we'll have to see, and we'll have to hope, that there isn't so much distraction, about internal societal issues that we forget about, the tremendous unifying and uplifting possibility that space has.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I
Open
would
floor.
just add that hopefully it will be bipartisanly supported. It remains to be seen fully whether that will be the case or not. When at some point we will have a Democratic president again, and whether that's whenever that is. But ultimately, seeing what happens when that occurs, because at the end of the day, this benefits everyone, and this is something that as Pete was saying already, this is something the whole nation can and should unite around, because it makes it ultimately everyone's lives better through the economic benefits that we can get from this. And so, yeah, it remains to be seen. I don't know if you can really say one way or the other yet. There has been Democrats in the past that have supported stuff in space, and hopefully that would be again. That is ultimately the point, is getting past partisanship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean. Nami, go ahead. You both get your chance. Don't worry.
Okay, so I think there is one concern. I think your listener was asking why were they so weak in space. I think the one concern I would have, think as a person looking at the future and patterns, is that the American space program seems to change its mission goals very frequently. So you would see that once it would be the moon, then when Obama came along, he said, been there, done that, let's focus on asteroids. Then you have President Trump come in and we have a moon to Mars strategy, right? And so the unique domain of space requires long-term investment. So if you want to go to Mars and establish, say, a human settlement, that's a 30, 40-year-old commitment. Now, if you keep changing your mission goals, what does it mean? That means that your resources are not there because you're shifting to something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concern you would have, because I think that's an advantage that China has, because they have a very continuous one-party system. Once they commit to a goal, say going to Mars in 2020, in 2000, they've continued that particular focus, right?
Yeah.
And so my concern is that with, like, suppose somebody else comes in. as president? Will they continue the same focus? Will they continue the same space resource utilization focus? Now, that's why I think Josh and Peter's point that bipartisan consensus is critical.
It,
Sean?
it really is. I want to. So it's not true that Democrats are not interested in space. There's some interesting stuff that's been happening, and I'm going to go all the way back 10 years.
We don't have too much time left, Michael.
Okay.
Just letting you know.
All right. Short.
Keep it short.
Short version.
And give Michael the floor when you're done.
Okay.
Or give Sean the floor. Sorry, excuse me.
So going back nearly 12 years, Obama did not like space. He actually went on record initially during the primary process, and he was going to cut NASA something like $5 billion out of only a $15 billion budget. That would have been crushing to NASA. Fast forward, and I know I'm going to rile some folks up here, Hillary was very, very good at space, and she brought her team into his team, and a lot of those folks at NASA and several other organizations actually increased at a time when the United States was in a recession. They actually increased the national budget for space pretty substantially. I think it went from, Obama was going to cut it from 15 to 10, and instead it went from 15 to 20. So that was when most of the other elements in the government were being cut. They actually increased almost across the board a lot of science and technology budgets.
So that was Democrats that did that.
That was the Democrats who did that.
Okay.
Now, fast forward, credit to all the folks on this call. They said that this administration has been very, very good for space. So I think it's yet to be seen what Biden is going to do. On the one side, he's got 8 years where it was actually his portfolio. NASA is the vice presidential portfolio, which is why Pence has taken on NASA. And so under those 8 years, Biden didn't actively support the space program. He didn't do anything to harm it, but he didn't. So it's still very much a verdict out kind of situation.
Right.
As Pete said, Trump didn't really say that much about what he was going to do, and it evolved while he was here. So I think the verdict is still out. Yeah.
Okay, Sean.
And just to kind of tie into more recently, wasn't exactly sure where the person posting the question came from, but we do finally have a Space Force caucus that got stood up. That's
just
2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, senators. I want to say you got Kristen Sinema from Arizona and Cory Gardner, Republican from Colorado, and I forget the other 2. But you do have a bipartisan caucus, at least for the new military service. Which, tying back to things we just said, if we can get the military service to kind of help guide the vision for what the long-term future needs of the space domain are going to be, then that should hopefully be that built-in bipartisan bridge where we can start advocating for long-range planning.
Yeah,
Excellent.
It's necessary to be bipartisan on this topic.
This is from Jamie Frost. Question for Sean: if aliens travel space, what do you think the most likely form of energy transport do they use?
Aliens travel space.
I see Pete's really interested too.
Aliens travel space. The most likely form of energy transport. Are they talking form of propulsion?
You whatever you think, however you take that. Sure.
Well, I only know what I know. I mean, we've got nuclear thermal rockets as being really good. I would love it if we had warp drive. That's what I'm certainly interested in, but I don't know how to do that. Ideally, you get something that's approaching reasonable travel times for interstellar travel, but intrasolar system, nuclear thermal, if we can get to fusion rockets, cool. Yeah.
Do you think the future of that has something to do with understanding gravity and manipulating gravity?
If we can figure out how to manipulate gravity, there's probably going to be some potential for propulsion there. It's just a question of applied science. You got to get the basic fundamental, right? Any R&D, science and technology endeavor in that regard, you have to understand the underlying physical mechanism, what makes that phenomenon happen. And then if you can manipulate it, if you can do something with it and control it, then you can start getting into the applied science and the engineering and acquisition side of it, and then start developing a true propulsion system around that concept. But
very cool. I'm excited about
we're ways
that.
off from anything exotic like that.
True. Well, you never know. You never know. How was jet fuel made? They blew up their dorm room and then we're told to keep going. So I don't know. All right. Kay says, one more question. What are your thoughts on Bob Lazar's story, especially him discussing element 115 before it was actually discovered? Anybody? I don't know anything about this myself.
I know of Bob Lazar, and I think element 115, I only know this through a source that has nothing to do with Bob Lazar, but element 115 is supposed to be called Illyrium. The only place that I know where Illyrium is a thing is in one of my favorite video games, XCOM. So, and they took that to Bob Lazar probably. So that's how that goes. But I can't speak to the technical accuracy of that story at all.
Okay.
It's just a story as far as I know.
Death by again comes back and says, I'm on the wrong account. I'm Tyler Klovic. Oh, okay. So maybe it's Death by Tyler. All right. Well, thanks for the super chat to clarify. David Miggs says, it would be nice for humanity to unite. Yes, it would. Yes. To form a United Nations in space, a star league of sorts, with a planetary defense force to back it up. I'd sign up to be on the SLDF. Very cool.
Nice.
I agree. It would be nice to fully unite, for everyone to be on the same page. But then, of course, someone said it through our conversations that we're always on our perspective. It's very easy to. I think Pete might have said this. That it's we're solid in what we believe is what's right and what's fair and what we want the world to be. But that's certainly not always the case for every country. So to achieve. Humanity as a whole to unite is something to be said. I mean, that would be a beautiful future.
That's why I joined the International Space University. It is the closest thing to Starfleet that actually really exists in the world. So if any of your folks want to go off and get a master's degree at ISU, shoot me a line. I'll hook you in the right direction.
How do they hit you up, Michael? Tell them how to find you.
At Liftport on Twitter. We've got our YouTube channel, YouTube/Twitter. What did I just say? YouTube /Liftport. And of course, our website is liftport.com. I've got a contact site there as well.
Excellent.
But International Space University, I wear the pin. I'm pretty proud of it. It's about 5,000 graduates around the world, about 100 different nations have all graduated master's students from this program. It's the closest thing to Starfleet. Like, it really actually is. So look up International Space University, isunet.edu. I'm the alumni president, so I'm kind of a big deal. Kind of a cheerleader. Oh yeah,
you've got your Space Frontier Foundation pin on too.
Very nice. Does anybody else want to? This is the end. So if anyone wants to, give a shout out to anything that you're working on. If anyone if you want to get a hold of anybody, go ahead, Josh.
So if I could do two things.
Sure.
One is that Sean and I are working on a new book. Hopefully it'll be out sometime early next year. We're still in the drafting stages of it. But talking about, I hate to use the space dream term after we've been talking about it in context with China, but the last two lines from Space Power Ascendant are: the Space Force and eventually other friendly space forces are the guardians of our political future. They will be the sentinels of the Silent Sea. And ultimately, that's what all of what we're talking about is, that it's for uniting people, having a better future in space.
I like that.
I've got my copy of Josh's book.
Very nice. There it is.
And his.
And then we'll plug mine and Nami's book. So Nami and I have just, this just hit the stores. a day
Nice.
or two ago. So Scramble for the Skies, the great power competition to control the resources of outer space.
Excellent.
And there's a lot that we discuss about this future in here.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Anybody else want to say a little something before we part ways?
Yeah, I think. Oh, Sean, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I
Sean.
think it was already said, but again, just if I'm going to plug, then Michael already said it. If you want my thesis, just go to Michael's Liftport page. He's got it posted, and yeah, it's free for public consumption, so go for it.
Excellent. Excellent. Go ahead, Nami.
Yeah, I think I would say that the new era for deep space exploration and development, your listeners should read it. It's a very easy document, but the vision statement is truly extraordinary because it talks about sustainable human presence on the moon, Mars, and beyond. So what that means is that if you want to achieve that future, you will have to align your not just your diplomatic and societal innovation structures, but also how your military Space Force culture is actually cultivated, if that is the policy goal. So I think that's something I would very much forward to anybody who is interested in U.S. space futures.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for coming. I'm, of course, talking to the guests that are here with me. And now I'll say thank you to all of you who showed up and listened to this wonderful conversation that we had. This has been the Saturday Adamcast IRL show. Usually tends to be a little different than my weekly Monday through Friday show. But either way, thank you for showing up. And please subscribe, share this video. People need to hear this conversation. This is really important. Honestly, this may be one of the more important conversations of humanity right now, because this is truly the future of where we are headed. We are going to be heading out into the silent sea, which is actually a really cool term that I didn't really know about. Thanks for that, Josh. I like that. It truly is the silent sea. You know, it's a vast open ocean out there that we are explorers. That's what we do. Let's have a passion. Let's give passion to younger generations that need passions. So share this video and, talk to other people about what's going on, because this is really exciting stuff. So thanks for showing up, and I will see you Monday at my normal time at 6:30 p.m. and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.